welcome everybody who's joined this session live. Hello to you, and hello to anyone who's watching this on the recording. So first, I should introduce our speakers. I'm joined by my colleague, Mike Garvin, who's our VP of Sales based in Boston. I'm joined by Dr. Fatini Dimaroli, who's the Outreach Fellow at Keble College, University of Oxford, and also by Alden Williams, who's the Assistant Director of International Marketing and Recruitment at University of Alabama at Birmingham. So Alden and Fatini, thank you so much for joining Mike and I on this session. We're going to do a very quick introduction to the Ambassador platform. We're then going to hand over to Fatini and Alden to hear about how they've deployed the platform at their institutions. And then if we do have 5 minutes at the end, we'll of course be taking questions from the crowd. So please do feel free to ask those. So to get us started, I think the first thing that I should say is that there's no panacea to boosting diversity, be that in the context of making your institution more internationally diverse, or in terms of increasing the participation of students from underrepresented groups. However, one thing that is a commonality between these two groups of prospective students is the challenge that they face when they're trying to understand what the experience of being part of a university or a college is really like when they're thinking about applying to it. Now, for prospective international students, they face a huge challenge of trying to understand what an institution is like thousands of miles away, of course, with all the additive challenges of language and culture and time zone that come with that. For a student from an underrepresented background, it's the same kind of informational deficit, but in their case, this often results from the fact that there might be little experience of higher education in their school, their family, or their community. And so there's often no one to ask about the experience of higher education. And this problem creates a chasm between what your university or college is really like, inclusive, ambitious, nuanced, exciting, and what a prospective student perceives it to be. And this chasm exists because no matter how good your outreach, recruitment, and comms channels are, none of them can get across the complete experience of what it's really like to be part of your institution in a nuanced and authentic way. And this chasm, this challenge, is a real one for prospective students, and we call that the insight gap.
We built the Ambassador platform to help universities and college close that insight gap that Nick was mentioning. And it's really simple. The Ambassador platform is an iframe that embeds on your website and enables prospective students to connect with your student, your staff, your faculty, alumni ambassadors through user-generated content and peer-to-peer conversations. So it's used by over 100 higher ed institutions around the world. Many of them are using the platform to help prospective international students understand the experience of being part of their university. We're seeing a big launch into domestic recruitment as well in different target markets, such as first generation students, women in STEM, et cetera. But again, we're seeing about 25% of our customers use it specifically to engage with prospective students from underrepresented groups. Like we said at the start, this is not a catch-all of boosting diversity, but we believe that enabling prospective students to find out more about the experiences of being part of a university or college from a peer or contemporary is a powerful piece of the puzzle. But anyway, enough from us. We're going to hand it now over to our guest speakers who you're really here to see. So Fatini and Alden. They'll share how 2 higher ed providers of ours that we work with have actually used the platform to boost diversity of international students and those from underrepresented backgrounds. So Fatini, over to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Fatini, and I am here to talk about how Keble College at Oxford has actually used the platform. In order to do so, I think it's important to speak briefly about what Oxford's specific challenges are and how it works in this particular institution, because that will explain why we launched the platform and what we were trying to get from it. So to start with, Oxford doesn't actually have a recruitment strategy as such, meaning that Oxford receives many applications. Despite Brexit, applications have been rising even this year. So there is no real use of the platform in terms of recruitment. What is really important for Oxford at this stage is the equality agenda. So what I mean by equality agenda is trying to reach populations that are underrepresented in Oxford on the basis of a few metrics. And these metrics are, broadly speaking, socioeconomic criteria and progression to higher education. The first factor that it's an access and outreach agenda. That's what we call the equality agenda in Oxford. And that's really why we launched the platform in the first place. The second particularity of Oxford is that applications are highly academic. The only thing that academics assess in Oxford is academic ability and potential, which means that a more holistic consideration of activities isn't really something that academics in Oxford take into account when selecting the student cohort. This makes accessing underrepresented populations particularly challenging, because it's a demanding application process. It's a very academic focused university. So this is the second reason why we thought that the Access platform would be a good idea in order to be able to access those populations, but also offer as much information as possible about a very demanding application process. Additionally, there is another challenge that Oxford faces, and that's the challenge of debunking stereotypes. It's a very, very old university. It's got a lot of traditions. And as Nick was saying earlier, it creates a very different impression on the outside versus the inside. So it was very important for us to bring our students into contact with school students and make sure that this information is actually transmitted about the fact that Oxford is in fact a normal, albeit academically focused university. Initially we launched the Access platform for reasons that had to do with accessibility. I have to make clear here that not every Oxford college uses the platform. Keble College decided to do so because this around 300 state schools in the West Midlands. Now, there's a particular area in the UK. The way that our equality agenda works in Oxford is that there are about 30 colleges in the university, and each college takes charge of a particular area. We call it the regionalisation scheme. So Oxford is in charge of the West Midlands, one of the most underprivileged areas in the UK, in the sense of having very sort of industrial history and a high BAME population, so low progression to higher education by and large. So the specific challenges that we're trying to face there, and we've been working with all these schools, but we found that it was very hard to access particular areas, and it was hard for students from these areas to visit Oxford. So the Access platform looked like a very good idea in order to enable us to have the more immediate sort of access. The other reason is because we found through qualitative data throughout the years that whenever students would visit us from the West Midlands, the part of the day they would enjoy the most was the day that reserved time for one-to-one contact with students, or group-to-one contact with students. We found that any sort of other activity, perhaps because it was bearing the mark of the institution, didn't have the same effect. So in our feedback forms, student-to-student contact always got the best rating. The other reason was because we realized that for school students, the chatting feature has become a native function, which means that any information that could be in that way is going to probably go down much better, or is going to be easier to access. So these were generally the reasons why we decided to launch our partnership. Now, we were also very lucky because we launched our partnership last April, just as when the pandemic was starting. We could have never preempted what would have happened, and we did not actually launch the Access platform because of the pandemic. It was in a very unlucky situation. Of course, it was sort of a lucky timing. So what we found from the Access platform that we didn't really expect. We didn't really expect that we would be able to get the populations we wanted to engage through the platform. So that's initially what we weren't sure about. We had to come up with a very strategic plan on how to advertise. Eventually, our results show that 90% of people who communicate through the platform are people from the areas we're trying to access, because we're able to actually advertise the platform in a way that was efficient. And I think it was very important to realize how this sort of tailored effort alongside with the Access platform could actually yield very good results. The other thing that we didn't really expect was our ability to cross-check admissions data with interaction data. So after the admissions period each year, we're able to put together the data of the people who interacted and the data of the people who applied, and see in numbers how well the act is performing for us. So that was extremely useful, and we found a lot of correspondences between the platform use and how that translated into applications. And the other thing we found is that in a way we didn't quite imagine before launching the Access platform, it was a way for our Access agenda to be tailored almost in itself, because students were able to pick an ambassador. When I say ambassador, I mean student helpers from Oxford who volunteer to have their profiles up on the Access platform. Students were able to select who they wanted to interact with through the chat feature on the basis of background, ethnicity, or subject of study. So it was a way of empowering students to actually make their own choice when it comes to who they wanted to talk to. So this is what we found. Generally, when it comes to using the platform, as I said, our main concern, which was whether we're going to be able to this particular population, was resolved through a few advertising and strategic moves. And we found that over COVID, the platform actually did a lot for us that we wouldn't have been able to accomplish because we didn't have face-to-face visits anymore. And in this sense, it is something that we're interested in keeping on doing for the future. Because I think we can attract numbers that weren't possible previously.
First of all, we have some overlap. We also got lucky at University of Alabama at Birmingham because we started using TAP in November of 2019. But it has been an absolute lifesaver and godsend for us during COVID. I am a very visual person, so I did make some slides for you to show you some examples of how we're using TAP specifically to reach international students. And there are definitely overlaps in terms of insight gap, and you can go on, Nick, thank you. There are definitely different insight gaps, specifically for international students, even though for any prospective student, there's overlap. Being in the American South, there are obviously some stereotypes that we have about different regions here in the United States, as well as internationally. You know, many students have either never traveled to the United States, or if they have, they've been to destinations like Boston, where Mike lives, they've been to New York or Miami. And so they have a lot of questions about why on earth would I go to Alabama? So location is one of the key areas that I focus on and where we have a main insight gap. So are Southern stereotypes true? These are some of the questions students ask. Is Birmingham rural? Sometimes students arrive in Birmingham and they expect to see cows and farms, and they're shocked that it's a city. They want to know if it's safe. Is it affordable? What on earth is there to do? Likewise with campus life. They have a picture of the South. They want to know if it's diverse. Are people accepting? Are people open-minded? And then, of course, the typical questions like, what are the accommodations like? And what's the food like? Will I be able to find halal food, for example? And then we have students asking questions, and there are similarities with domestic students, but they want to know things like, how can I change a major? Students are not used to the flexibility that the US provides in terms of different programs. They also want to know, are classes difficult? They want to know if students like their programs. They want to know what types of classes they will take. Many students that we come across don't realize that an undergraduate degree, for example, is 4 years. So lots of kind of basic level education about how higher ed in the US works. And then information. We are in an age where we either have information overload and students are trying to parse through it and find the information specifically for them. But likewise, when it comes to international students, it's often very difficult for them to find information that's meant for them. So questions about visas and other information, we help them with through TAP. So this is what some of my curated marketing looks like. And you'll notice this is, focusing on location first and foremost. And Nick, if you'll go to the next slide, this is why I love working with ambassadors so much, because it is not curated. It's very real. I think as humans, we look for connection. We take recommendations from others, and especially those that have similar backgrounds to us, or maybe have similar goals that we do. And we also don't want to be left behind. So students are absolutely looking to each other. They're looking to family members for advice on what to do. I can only do so much. And full disclosure, I am a one-woman marketing and recruitment show for UAB for everything international. And so I also love TAP because it is a better extension of me. Students are approachable. It's way less intimidating than scheduling a meeting with admissions. It's far more authentic. Students are free to share their real, genuine experience, and therefore it's influential. So the amount of time that I could spend as one person speaking to our, hundreds, if not thousands of offer holders is finite and is far less useful and far less effective than allowing students the chance to connect with each other. Go on, Nick. Thank you. So this is an example of one of the features that TAP offers, which is a content feature. So students can essentially post their goings-ons, their weekend activities, their trip to the beach, as you see here. And yes, Alabama does have beaches. Florida stole most of our coastline, but we do have access to beaches. So when you see these photos here, this is not, these are, as millennials or Gen Zs would say, these are unfiltered. And I mean that on the very most basic level. Students can post whatever they like. We do have access to, as an administrator, review these, but we love the content we receive. And Nick, if you'll go to the next slide, there's just a few more examples. One of our student assistants recently got vaccinated, and there's her CDC vaccination card. Students traveling throughout the South, showing what there is to do here and how diverse our student body is. And then on the next page, I can show you essentially why this is so useful to me. Not only are students, prospective students, accessing this information and reading through frequently asked questions when they're chatting with students, but we then take some of their posts and we repost them to our social media. There is no way to describe how invaluable it is to have true, authentic student voices and their real experiences. I can hire a photographer or I can attend an event and take photos, but hearing from an actual student and hearing their voice and seeing their own photos is far more effective in the long run. And the next slide just shows a few more of these pictures with that focus of amplification. So one thing I'll point out too is this photo on the far right is my favorite, showing students on campus during COVID, wearing their masks, hanging out, spending time together, socially distanced. And during this time, as you can imagine, as everyone has, we've received countless questions. Is the university really open? And the answer for UAB, because we have a huge health system, is yes. We have remained open and we've gone back and forth between hybrid classes, but moving forward, we will be fully open starting in summer. And so sharing that information, students are very curious and very apprehensive about travel right now, of course, and there's really only so much I can do to show them what life looks like without this kind of genuine perspective from a real student. So one of the ways that we keep content going on and flowing, we usually get between 50 and 75 content posts from our ambassadors every month, is we help give them prompts. So this is what a content calendar looks like in the TAP platform, where we are able to, and I'm sorry, Thursdays are my dog's favorite days because it's garbage day and delivery day. So I tried to give him a bone, but here we are. So all that being said, if you'll go to the next slide, Nick, today's April Fools. We'll see if they post anything about April Fools today. But we do a few other things to help drive engagement. We do post on social media, introducing ambassadors and encouraging students to go and start a chat. But out of the number of page views we get on TAP, about 15 to 20% of those students, at least recently, have actually created an account. So it's an opt-in process, but I don't care. I want to engage with these students. However, the fact that they're going and helping themselves to FAQs and getting a feel for the university is light years ahead of where we were prior to using TAP. So we have added chat pop-up boxes onto several different international student web pages that we have, where students can just click straight through and talk to somebody right away. We also host virtual ambassador panels. I talk about TAP on all of our virtual events, and we've even sort of found ways to creatively use TAP for virtual fairs where we tell students, you're welcome on this day. We are all going to be available to talk to you and answer your questions. We also focus on re-engaging with students. So if someone reached out to us in January or February, for example, we may go back through and check back in with them. And then last but not least, we have match campaigns. And you see here, this is Mizuho, one of our Japanese ambassadors. And we have these little cards for each one of our ambassadors, and we send them in an email campaign saying, hi, you're from Japan, Mizuho's from Japan, or maybe you're both computer science majors. And those campaigns have been incredibly helpful. If you'll go to the next page, Nick, I have some numbers for you, and then we'll get to questions. So after that campaign, the first campaign that we did was in March 2020, where we matched students. We saw a 340% increase in prospects. So basically, anytime, if you look at these prospect accounts created on the right there, anytime we've run any type of campaign, you see those boosts going significantly higher. I also want to point out how diverse the nationalities are. In general, we do attract a lot of master's students from India. So it's no surprise to me that 33% of our students are starting chats from India, but you'll see all those other different colors represent a number of different countries. And I've been amazed at how our reach has really extended further than when I was able to travel and when we were in country and meeting students face to face. So this is something that we will absolutely continue to utilize and continue to build our reach. But at the end of the day, I think the message is clear. Peer-to-peer marketing and that authenticity that you get with genuine student connections is unparalleled. So I want to open it up to questions, but there's an idea of how we've used it and some of the benefits we've seen.
Thank you so much, Alden and Fatini, for those excellent presentations. I think we've got about 4 minutes, so I think we can squeeze in 1 or 2 questions. We've had loads come in, so thank you very much to the audience. Any that we don't cover here, we'll do by email. So Fatini, if I could put a question straight to you, please. An audience member has asked if you can give more detail about how you were able to target the platform so well to reach those you wanted to. 90% seems to be very high from the demographic that you were targeting. So yeah, how were you able to target the platform?
So to start with, we did hide, so to speak, the chat pop-up. That means that it didn't you don't come across the chat pop-up straight away when you log onto our website, but you need to go to undergraduate admissions in order to find it. And so the people usually with the information that the Access platform exists are able to find it. And as Alden also mentioned, whenever I do virtual events, especially, and again, because of COVID, my virtual events sometimes feature 500 participants. It means that in one go, you might have 500 people hearing about where exactly the chat box is on the site, and it's a select population. And then if that happens twice every week, then that's how you. I think, again, COVID contributed very much to the fact that everything became virtual, and therefore the advertising efforts were a lot more wide-reaching, and we're able to sort of target particular populations in that way, larger populations in that way.
Thank you, Fatima. That's super useful. And Alden, I think we've got time for one more question. Could you very briefly just talk about how you selected and then trained your ambassadors?
Sure. And I just want to add really quick for the person that asked the question to Fatini, we have also done targeted campaigns specifically to match Chinese students, just as one example, where we are focusing on those students in particular. And you can do that through just an email list or WhatsApp or WeChat for those students. But we also do, I forget what it's called. I think that they're basically gates. You can use social media to post advertisements in specific areas and zip codes all around the world. And so if we're trying to reach a Saudi population, for example, and we want to highlight our Saudi ambassadors, we can easily target that audience. Training and hiring ambassadors. So our ambassadors have multiple responsibilities. They actually also work at our welcome desk in our International Student Center. So they are very focused on sort of customer service and providing students with a welcoming atmosphere and being helpful. So we have provided things like cheat sheets and information so that they can pass on links to important pages, because many of these students are pre-application, or perhaps they've received an offer but have extra questions. So I would say I stay in regular contact with them. They also went through the TAP training available, which is very, very useful in terms of how to best use the platform and how to create your bio and things like that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alden. I'm sorry we didn't get to the end of all the questions. We will follow up by email. A huge thank you to Mike for joining me, and especially to Alden and Fatini for those excellent presentations. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us live. If you want to find out more about our platform, then please visit our website. It'll be in the follow-up materials. And also, I'm sure Alden and Fatini would love to connect to share their experiences and the great work they've done. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.